Chapter 2581. Her and Chu Yufei's pure and clean bodies were all seen by the group of uncouth guards. When this operation was over, they would become the laughingstock of many people. And all of this was because of Chu Xiaofeng and Luo Shaoqi, especially that Luo Shaoqi. Thinking of how she didn't hesitate to let them take away those spiritual herbs. Chu Ku'er didn't believe that she didn't know the effects of those spiritual herbs. She must have known. She knew that those were beastler grass. Otherwise, she wouldn't have stubbornly given those spiritual herbs to them. At that time, she thought that she was afraid of them and wanted to spend money to avoid disaster. In the end, what did she mean by spending money to avoid disaster? The other party was clearly waiting for them to fall into his trap. Seeing them get the beast-luring grass in their hands, they didn't even realize it. B*TCH. B* starred. Chu Ku'er's face was ugly and her limbs were trembling. She wished she could chop Luo Shaoqi into pieces. And Chu Xiaofeng, who indulged Luo Shaoqi. If it weren't for him, Luo Shaoqi wouldn't have given those spiritual herbs to them. In short, all of this was their fault. When Chu Ku'er's voice sounded beside her, Chu Yufei's face also revealed a gloomy smile. Compared to before, Chu Yufei was very different. The most obvious thing was that the gentle and kind smile on her face was gone. At this moment, Chu Yufei's face was cold and her eyes were cold. Her eyes were full of resentment and ice. She and Chu Ku'er had encountered those things together and had completely destroyed the defense in her heart. Thinking that she was the one who forced Luo Shaoqi to give those spiritual herbs to them, Chu Yufei's heart was filled with hatred. She was good at playing with people's hearts and acting. At that time, she thought that they had taken advantage of her by forcing Luo Shaoqi to give those spiritual herbs to them. At the same time, she felt that she had vented her anger. In the end, who would have thought that it was all her wishful thinking? In fact, Luo Shaoqi had deliberately given those spiritual herbs to them. She wanted them to be chased by those magical beasts. She hated that she thought that her scheme had succeeded. In the end, she was played in circles. Now that Chu Lingfeng had died, she would never let Luo Shaoqi and the others off. At that time, let's see how Chu Xiaofeng will protect them. Chu Yufei's face darkened. As for Chu Tianming and the others, they looked in the direction of the dense forest and were overjoyed. After getting rid of Chu Lingfeng, the third elder's people would once again be in the direct line of descent. At that time, if they had a good relationship with Chu Ku'er and the others, when Chu Yuqing ascended to the position, wouldn't they be able to obtain great benefits? Everyone was trying their best to flatter Chu Ku'er. At the same time, they were also very attentive to Chu Yufei. Because without Chu Lingfeng, Chu Yufei was once again the little princess of the Tianfeng Chu family, who was highly valued by the head of the family, who didn't know that the patriarch treated her like his own daughter. It was only when Chu Lingfeng, the true descendant of the family head, appeared that Chu Yufei's identity became awkward and embarrassing. Once Chu Lingfeng died, everything would return to its original trajectory. Regardless of whether it was Chu Ku'er, Chu Yufei, or Chu Tianming, they all thought the same. Chapter 2582. Rumble. Chu Yuqing and the others were attacking Chu Lingfeng with all their might. Because they didn't want others to find out that they were the ones who had attacked Chu Lingfeng, they didn't dare to kill Chu Lingfeng. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been difficult for Chu Yuqing's guards to kill Chu Lingfeng, since they had already surrounded him. There was no way they could have dragged this out for so long. They were desperately trying to exhaust Chu Lingfeng's bloodline power. Seeing that his injuries were becoming more and more difficult to heal, the sneers on their faces deepened. Just then, they heard the sound of a stampeding horde of magical beasts. Chu Yuqing immediately waved his hand. Get out of the way. Let those magical beasts charge in and stomp him into meat paste. Chu Yuqing's expression was extremely arrogant. Chu Lingfeng was dead for sure. His bloodline power was about to be exhausted, and his healing abilities were no longer as strong as before. Once those magical beasts swarmed him, they would definitely trample him to death. At that time, what undying body, what unique bloodline. All of it would be a joke. The true winner would be him, Chu Yuqing. It would be their third elder's faction. With a wave of his hand, Chu Yuqing's guards immediately scattered, revealing a path that led to Chu Lingfeng's encirclement. The group stood at both ends, waiting for the magical beasts to charge in and trample Chu Lingfeng to death. Rumble! The magical beast's stomps were extremely loud. Very quickly, a line of magical beasts appeared in front of Chu Yuqing and the others. Why isn't there anyone in front of these magical beasts? Chu Yuqing and the others looked at the horde of magical beasts charging in their direction in confusion. Why were these magical beasts running over on their own? Where were the guards? Were they behind them? With this thought in mind, they immediately raised their heads and looked behind them. However, that place was filled with smoke and dust caused by the magical beasts' movements. None of them could clearly see the scene behind them. They didn't care about it in their hearts. They were just waiting for those magic beasts to rush over and crush Chu Lingfeng. However, no one noticed that when the magical beasts arrived, Snowball, who had been constantly wailing and struggling to get up to help Chu Lingfeng, only to be suppressed by the attacks of Chu Yuqing and the others, suddenly looked in the direction of the magical beasts with pleasant surprise. Roar! It opened its throat and snarled. To Chu Yuqing and the others, that sound was nothing more than a cold howl. But only Snowball knew that it was full of surprises. Master! Master is here! After such a long time, Snowball was unable to restrain the excitement and anticipation in her heart, as she once again felt Luo Qingtong's existence at such a close distance. The sharp screams from her mouth became even more resounding and exciting. In the eyes of Chu Yuqing and the others, they thought it was heartbroken and despairing. Haha! Even this beast knows fear? That idiot Chu Lingfeng treasures it so much. Now that you see Chu Lingfeng about to be trampled to death by these magical beasts, you must feel despair in your heart, right? Haha, the more despair you feel, the better. This damned beast, he's embarrassed me so much in the past. Chu Yuqing's expression was cold as he looked in Snowball's direction. Chapter 2583. In the end, this beast wasn't easy to deal with, and had tortured him to the point of hovering between life and death. But with Chu Lingfeng protecting it, there was nothing he could do. His master couldn't deal with it, and his pet couldn't either. It could be said that Chu Yuqing hated this man and beast to the bone. What he didn't know was that Chu Lingfeng wasn't Snowball's master at all. And the latter's surprised cries weren't because of Chu Lingfeng either. Boom! The magical beasts had already charged in front of them, and the guards had already scattered, waiting to see a good show. However, before they could react, a voice rang out. Swish, swish, swish. Invisible threads shot out from the back of the horde and blocked the path of the demonic beasts. The demonic beasts that had long been used to being chased away by Luo Qingtong's threads suddenly stopped in their tracks. They had originally been charging towards Chu Lingfeng, who was in the middle of the encirclement, but they immediately scattered and charged towards Chu Yuqing and the others. What? Chu Yuqing and the others had been waiting to see Chu Lingfeng get trampled to death, but they hadn't expected that the magical beasts would suddenly change directions. This time, they had become the magical beasts' targets. Damn it, what's going on? The smile on Chu Yuqing's face instantly froze. His lips were still curled upward, but his face was filled with disbelief. Seeing those magical beasts rushing towards them, he hurriedly shouted in exasperation. Quick! Stop them! Drive them into the encirclement! Chu Yuqing's heart was in a state of panic. The magical beasts' attacks were secondary. More importantly, he was afraid that the magical beasts would break through the encirclement. That way, Chu Lingfeng would be able to escape with his life. Damn it, what's going on? Why are these magical beasts suddenly charging at us? Before Chu Yuqing and the others could figure out what was going on, a crimson figure shot out from behind the magical beast horde like a bolt of lightning. In an instant, it had entered the encirclement and appeared beside Chu Yuqing. Luo Qingtong's body was covered with the blood of the guard she had killed. Her light blue robe was also dyed red. At this moment, she was standing beside Chu Lingfeng. She looked at him and snorted, "Blockhead." As soon as she spoke, Chu Lingfeng, who was still vigilant because of her appearance, was stunned. Then he cried out in surprise. "Master!" His eyes were filled with surprise and excitement as he looked at the blood-robed young man in front of him. Excitement and excitement were unable to express his feelings at this moment. He fiercely wiped the blood off his face. He was both emotional and wanted to cry. Woo woo, master, I miss you so much. As he spoke, he was about to fly over, but was stopped by Luo Qingtong. Hey, wait! Let's leave this place first. Luo Qingtong raised a hand to stop him. Her heart was filled with helplessness. This blockhead, can't he look at the situation first? What's he getting so worked up for? It's more important to leave first. Luo Qingtong was speechless. However, she was already used to Chu Lingfeng's one-track mind and foolish personality. She knew that it was useless to bicker with him, so she didn't waste any more time talking nonsense with him. Hearing this, Chu Lingfeng's expression became solemn. Yes, master, I'll listen to you. He wiped the tears from his face and stood beside Luo Qingtong in a flash. But very quickly, his domineering expression turned into a pitiful one. Chapter 2584. Chu Lingfeng's body was covered in wounds, and the healing of his bloodline power was becoming slower and slower. Most importantly, there was no more spiritual energy in his body. After entering the abandoned continent, Chu Lingfeng had obtained a lot of spiritual herbs, all of which had been found by Snowball. But now, under the siege of Chu Yuqing and the others, the spiritual herbs he'd obtained had all been used up. Otherwise, Snowball wouldn't have been so powerless. Don't worry, I have some. As Luo Qingtong spoke, she raised her hand and took out the spiritual herbs in her storage ring, then threw them to Chu Lingfeng. She had been running all the way here with those magical beasts, and it wasn't like she hadn't done anything. Those spiritual herbs had all been picked by her along the way. As long as Chu Lingfeng needed them, she could have as many of these spiritual herbs as she wanted. This is for you. You and Snowball can eat it together. Luo Qingtong threw 2 bottles of pills to Chu Lingfeng. She wanted him to feed them to himself and Snowball. The pills that Luo Qingtong refined all had medicinal properties on the abandoned continent. Although the effects of these pills weren't as good as 20% of what they were outside, it was still better than nothing. What's more, Luo Qingtong didn't have much on hand, but she had a lot of pills. These pills had all been refined by her in Heavenly Wind Mercenary City. After all, she'd had nothing to do at that time. She'd gotten a lot of benefits from appraising the items of those mercenary groups. Chu Lingfeng took the pills that Luo Qingtong gave him. Without saying anything, he directly poured out a bottle and ate it. The rest was all given to Snowball. He didn't ask Luo Qingtong why her pills still had medicinal properties on the abandoned continent. From Chu Lingfeng's point of view, his master could do anything that would shock people. It wouldn't be too much. This was his master. Heretical Dr. Ghost Eye. Master, I'm done. Chu Lingfeng was in high spirits. As soon as Luo Qingtong's medicine entered his mouth, all the wounds on his body were healed. However, the bloodline power in his body had been exhausted, and he could no longer convert the attacks of others into energy like before. While healing himself, he could still fight bravely. Right now, he had the strength of an ordinary cultivator. Chu Lingfeng was worried that he couldn't protect Luo Qingtong. After all, Master's strength hasn't even reached the venerable realm. He was really too useless. She actually needed her master to save her at this time. Chu Lingfeng was vexed. He opened his mouth, wanting to tell Luo Qingtong to leave first, but he saw Luo Qingtong's figure rise. Let's go. She jumped onto Snowball's body and pulled Chu Lingfeng up. Snowball's internal injuries had healed. Its broken right leg had also recovered to its original state. The moment Luo Qingtong and Chu Lingfeng came up, it immediately soared into the air. Chu Lingfeng, Chu Yuqing, and the others were currently dealing with the rampaging magical beasts. He'd been paying attention to Chu Lingfeng the entire time. When he saw Luo Qingtong appear by Chu Lingfeng's side, his expression immediately froze. When he saw Luo Qingtong and Chu Lingfeng both get onto Snowball's body, he was stunned. Snowball, who had been seriously injured and unable to move, suddenly soared into the air. Chu Yuqing's expression was indescribably furious. Hurry! Hurry and bring them down for me. He absolutely couldn't let Chu Lingfeng escape. Chu Lingfeng's voice was hoarse. Chapter 2585. What's going on? Who's that youth that suddenly appeared? Why did he suddenly come to save Chu Lingfeng? And how did the injuries on Chu Lingfeng and that demonic beast heal so quickly? Chu Yuqing's expression was malevolent. As he thought about these questions, the expression on his face kept changing. His facial expression was twitching violently for an indescribable reason. The guards had been in the middle of driving away and stopping the demonic beasts. When they heard his voice, they raised their heads and saw Chu Lingfeng and Luo Qingtong soaring into the air. They were instantly shocked. Quick, stop them! The guards were so anxious that they didn't have time to deal with the demonic beasts. They leapt into the air and charged towards Luo Qingtong and Chu Lingfeng. Master! Seeing the guards, all of whom were at the 6th level of the human martial realm, rushing over, Chu Lingfeng felt extremely vexed. If he'd known that he'd run into his master here, he would have brought the guards the Tianfeng Chu clan had prepared for him. He definitely wouldn't have let Chu Yuqing and the others have the chance to harm his master. Chu Yuqing, you bastard! If you dare to harm my master, I'll kill you. Sitting on the little snowball, Chu Lingfeng's eyes were bloodshot as he watched the guards charge at him. He clenched his fists tightly as he shouted at Chu Yuqing and the others below him. Stop! Master! Chu Yuqing and the others were shocked. They'd never heard of a fool like Chu Lingfeng having a master. Chu Yuqing carefully examined Luo Qingtong and discovered that she was only at the venerable realm. He immediately laughed coldly. Haha! A bastard child outside is a bastard child. Chu Lingfeng, you fool! You're actually willing to degrade yourself and recognize a kid who isn't even at the venerable realm as your master. How can someone like you be worthy of being our Chu clan's young master? Today, I'll clean up the house on behalf of the Tianfeng Chu clan. When Chu Yuqing saw how protective Chu Lingfeng was of Luo Qingtong, he felt both proud and pleasantly surprised. He hadn't expected to reap such a harvest this time. Chu Lingfeng, this fool, was willing to degrade himself to become someone else's servant. Since that's the case, don't blame me for using this weakness to kill him. Chu Yuqing didn't care who Luo Qingtong was. In any case, since she appeared here, she was already a dead person. Kill them. Chu Yuqing gave the order to the guards. Earlier, he didn't dare to kill Chu Lingfeng here, because there was no one to take the blame for them. But now, Luo Qingtong's appearance gave them a reason. After killing them here, he would make it look like Chu Lingfeng was killed by the young man. What did this matter have to do with them? At that time, they would find out the identities of Chu Lingfeng and this young man. Everything would be settled, wouldn't it? This was a weakness that Chu Lingfeng had personally delivered to his doorstep. How could he not make good use of it? Chu Yuqing threw his head back and laughed heartily. Then he gave the order, his killing intent overflowing. The guards were also thinking the same thing as Chu Yuqing. Immediately, those who attacked did not hold back in the slightest. Luo Qingtong narrowed her eyes as she watched the figures rushing towards them from all directions. 3rd level of the human martial realm, 6th level of the human martial realm, 4th level of the human martial realm. TSK, they're all experts. The Tianfeng Chu clan really spared no effort in protecting their top disciples. Chapter 2586. Luo Qingtong raised her hand to stop Chu Lingfeng, who was about to attack. This guy was only at the peak of the 9th level of the Amethyst Elder. Although the strength he could display was comparable to that of the human martial realm, his bloodline strength had been exhausted. How could he be a match for these people? She didn't go through untold hardships to save him just to see him throw his life away. You stay here obediently. Luo Qingtong scolded Chu Lingfeng in a low voice. Then, she raised her hand, and in an instant, she was surrounded by circles of silk. Swish, swish. These silk threads circled around Luo Qingtong, enveloping her, Chu Lingfeng and Snowball. Let's go. Looking at the guards who were rushing over, Luo Qingtong's lips curled up slightly. She patted Snowball's back, telling it not to stop, and to continue rushing forward. After receiving her order, Snowball didn't hesitate in the slightest. Its 4 limbs stomped fiercely in the air, and in an instant, it was like a snow-white stream of light, rushing towards the guards who were rushing over. Overestimating yourself. You actually dare to rush towards us. These guards thought highly of themselves. Luo Qingtong's strength wasn't even at the revered realm. This was obvious in their eyes. In addition, Chu Lingfeng's bloodline strength had been exhausted. No matter how the crowd calculated, Luo Qingtong and Chu Lingfeng couldn't rush out of the encirclement they were in. Since the other party was rushing over to be killed, then they would fulfill her wish. The crowd rushed towards Luo Qingtong and Chu Lingfeng fiercely. Because they were proud, they didn't use any martial skills to attack Luo Qingtong and Chu Lingfeng. Otherwise, they would have discovered that Luo Qingtong was surrounded by circles of silk, surrounding her and Chu Lingfeng from all directions. At this moment, Luo Qingtong and Chu Lingfeng were like huge meat grinders as they rushed forward. As for those guards, they still didn't know anything. Get down here. At this moment, a guard rushed towards Luo Qingtong and Chu Lingfeng. He raised his hand and tried to grab Luo Qingtong and Chu Lingfeng off Snowball. However, just as his hand reached out, in an instant, a tragic cry rang out. In an instant, the hands that the guard had extended towards Luo Qingtong and Chu Lingfeng were cut into countless pieces of flesh. The invisible threads around Luo Qingtong were rapidly revolving around her. No one knew what kind of terrifying power the threads of the 1,000 silkworms would display in this kind of situation. These threads were originally the weapons that the 1,000 silkworms relied on to survive. Many magical beasts and humans who were stronger than them had died under their threads. Now in Luo Qingtong's hands, these threads were displaying an even more terrifying power. Luo Qingtong didn't need to use any of her own strength. She only needed to maintain these threads at high speed. These incomparably tenacious threads that were difficult to cut would, in an instant, teach these human martial realm guards what it meant to be a human. What? Seeing this scene, Chu Yuqing and the other guards below were all shocked. Chapter 2587. What are those? Chu Yuqing's face turned pale with shock as he cried out. What were those things that could actually injure a human martial realm expert by his side? A youth who hadn't even reached the venerable realm. What was going on? Chu Yuqing's mind was in a complete mess. As for the other guards, their faces were also filled with indescribable shock and regret. They simply couldn't answer Chu Yuqing's question, because even they didn't know what those things were. They looked like silk threads. But what kind of silk threads could allow a youth who hadn't even reached the venerable realm to injure a human martial realm guard? What's more, that guard wasn't an ordinary low-level human martial realm expert. Rather, he was an expert at the 4th level of the human martial realm. Everyone's faces were filled with shock as they watched the human martial realm guard clutch his arm and howl miserably. Then, he was cut into pieces by the silk threads around Luo Qingtong. The silk threads around Luo Qingtong were dyed with blood. Like sharp blades flying up and down, they completely surrounded her, Chu Lingfeng and Snowball. Everywhere they passed, the human martial realm guards who were attacking her were all injured by the silk threads around her body. These silk threads didn't have much power. But these silk threads, which didn't have much power, were like divine weapons, preventing the group of human martial realm guards from attacking. Facing Luo Qingtong and Chu Lingfeng, who were completely wrapped in these silk threads, they finally understood what kind of situation they were in. They could either let Luo Qingtong and Chu Lingfeng go, or they could forcefully attack under the terrifying defense of Luo Qingtong's silk threads and be strangled to death. A youth who hadn't even reached the venerable realm, carrying some unknown silk threads, had actually forced them to this point. Chu Yuqing looked at Luo Qingtong and Chu Lingfeng in the sky. He was so angry that he gnashed his teeth and stomped his feet. But there was nothing he could do. The threads in Luo Qingtong's hands were very difficult to cut. However, Luo Qingtong's blood-red eyes allowed her to easily see the trajectories of the human martial realm guards' attacks. The threads in her hands were constantly changing and reforming. Under her control, the silk threads in her hands changed in many ways. Compared to the silk webs spat out by the 1,000 silkworms, their power and effectiveness were many times more difficult to deal with. After the guards tried to attack several times, but were killed instead, they didn't dare to move again. They could only watch as Luo Qingtong took Chu Lingfeng away. A young man, who hadn't even reached the venerable realm, had saved the person they wanted to kill from the hands of a group of people who were around the 6th level of the human martial realm. If they hadn't experienced it themselves, They wouldn't have dared to believe that it was true. Especially those human martial realm guards. They looked at Luo Qingtong as if they were looking at a monster. They didn't doubt that if it wasn't for Luo Qingtong's insufficient strength, she could have used these silk threads to completely trap them here. What was going on? Who exactly was this young man? Their hearts were overwhelmed with shock. Luo Qingtong had already taken Chu Lingfeng far away. The power of her silk threads looked very frightening. But that was only because those guards hadn't reacted in time. Chapter 2588. Luo Qingtong was well aware of the limitations of the power of her threads. Therefore, as soon as she opened a gap, she immediately left with Chu Lingfeng and Snowball. Chu Yuqing quickly reacted after they left, and then flew into a rage. Chu Lingfeng. His voice was filled with rage, as if he was about to cry blood. By the time he wanted the guards to chase after them, Luo Qingtong and Chu Lingfeng had already disappeared. Instantly, he spat out a mouthful of blood and fell to the ground with a thud. He was obviously very angry. How could Chu Yuqing not be angry? In order to kill Chu Lingfeng, how long had he planned? He had just lured Chu Lingfeng into this dense forest and had made all the necessary preparations to ambush him. In the end, just as he was about to make his move, someone had interfered and rescued him. If that person had been a powerful cultivator, it would have been fine. But the other party was a youth, who had not even reached the venerable realm. This was such a great humiliation. No matter how tenacious and valiant Chu Yuqing's mind was, he could not bear this blow. Moreover, if he missed the chance to kill Chu Lingfeng this time, he might not have such a chance again. And once Chu Lingfeng returned to the Tianfeng Chu clan, what kind of punishment and revenge would he and the Third Elder's faction suffer? Chu Yuqing did not dare to think about it. This time, he was truly infuriated. He could not control the surging emotions in his heart. When his blood-sobbing scream rang out, on the small slope outside the dense forest, Chu Kuer and the others' hearts all jumped. That voice just now, it sounded like my big brother's? Chu Kuer's face was full of shock. She looked in the direction of the dense forest, and the expression on her face kept changing. What was going on? Why was her big brother's voice so blood-sobbing and mournful? Could it be that something had gone wrong with killing Chu Lingfeng? As she thought of this, her heart was suddenly in chaos. At this moment, the voices of Chu Tianming and the others suddenly sounded. Look, that white light. They raised their hands and pointed at a ray of light that swept across the sky above the dense forest. If that light wasn't a snowball, then what was it? They were shocked to see Chu Lingfeng and Luo Qingtong sitting on Snowball. Oh no, Chu Lingfeng is not dead. The Third Elder's faction was finished, and so were they. At this time, someone with sharp eyes saw Luo Qingtong sitting in front of Chu Lingfeng. It's Luo Xiaoqi. It's Luo Xiaoqi. Chu Tianming and the others cried out in a shrill voice. They looked at the young man sitting on the snowball in disbelief, unable to wrap their heads around the situation. What was going on? Why was Luo Xiaoqi here? And with Chu Lingfeng? Could it be that Chu Lingfeng's rescue had something to do with her? Everyone was shocked. After seeing Luo Qingtong sitting on Snowball, Chu Yufei's nails instantly dug into her palms. Luo Xiaoqi, how could it be her? It was her again. Chu Yufei's heart was set off waves of shock. She also gave advice in this operation to kill Chu Lingfeng. She used the elixirs that Chu Lingfeng was looking for as bait to lure Chu Lingfeng over. Then, they surrounded him and used magical beasts to trample him to death. Chapter 2589. She was the one who had subtly influenced Chu Kuer to bring up all of this. Why was this Luo Xiaoqi messing things up again? Was this person really her nemesis? Why was she always ruining her plans? Chu Yufei bit her lip hard, while Chu Kuer screamed with a sharp expression. Damn it, why is this Luo Xiaoqi here again? Why is it her again? Like Chu Yufei, Chu Kuer hated Luo Qingtong to the bone. Now that she had appeared, she was with Chu Lingfeng, and the latter had obviously escaped from her big brother's trap. In an instant, blood surged in her mind. The next second she fell to the ground with a bang. She had fainted from anger. Luo Qingtong didn't know about this episode. She took Chu Lingfeng and Snowball, and flew for a while. Soon, they appeared in a safe dense forest. This place was already very far from the dense forest, where Chu Yuqing and the others had set up an ambush. Along the way, Luo Qingtong's blood eye looked after them. Luo Qingtong and the others didn't encounter a single magical beast. Instead, they plucked a lot of spiritual herbs. Luo Qingtong gave half of the spiritual herbs to Chu Lingfeng. She put the rest in her pocket, ready to take it back to Yi Qianxian and the others. Otherwise, she wouldn't be able to explain herself if someone was looking for her, but couldn't find her after being out for so long. Luo Qingtong didn't want to expose her identity yet. Therefore, she didn't want to say anything about Chu Lingfeng for the time being. 2 people and 1 beast landed in the dense forest. Luo Qingtong found a hidden cave and settled Chu Lingfeng and Snowball down. Because there were no outsiders around, Luo Qingtong directly took out the beast-repelling powder and sprinkled it around the cave. After confirming that no more magical beasts would pass by, she immediately looked at Chu Lingfeng and said, "How are you? Are you okay? How's the recovery in your body?" Luo Qingtong was naturally asking about Chu Lingfeng's bloodline power. She had long known that Chu Lingfeng's physique was different from ordinary people. Previously, the situation was urgent, so she didn't have time to check on Chu Lingfeng. Only now did she have the time to ask him about his condition. "I'm fine, master. I just overused my energy. I'll be fine after a few days of rest," Chu Lingfeng said with a simple and honest expression. He looked at Luo Qingtong and said with a silly smile, "Mistress, I didn't expect it to be you. I thought I was dreaming." Chu Lingfeng was overjoyed. He had never thought that Luo Qingtong would actually be on this abandoned continent. Moreover, he had come to save him when he was in danger. How could Master be so powerful and godly? How did she know that he was here, and that he was in danger? Chu Lingfeng looked at Luo Qingtong with eyes full of worship and reverence. Luo Qingtong looked at his fanboy eyes and couldn't help but feel angry and amused. What was this big blockhead thinking? She wasn't an immortal who could predict. It was just a coincidence that she knew that he was in danger on this abandoned continent. However, Luo Qingtong also knew that she couldn't explain it to Chu Lingfeng clearly, so she simply let him think whatever he wanted. "Little Snowball told me to come over," Luo Qingtong said. Then she frowned and asked Chu Lingfeng, "Who is the person who wants to kill you?" Although Luo Qingtong had already guessed that it might be related to the third elder, she still wanted to confirm it. "It's Chu Yuqing." Chapter 2590. He scratched his head, then said uncertainly, "That should be his name." He had offended too many members of the Tianfeng Chu clan. Chu Lingfeng didn't even remember their names. Chu Lingfeng had only managed to remember Chu Yuqing's name after he'd revealed it during the ambush. If Chu Yuqing knew that the person he wanted to kill didn't even know who he was, who knew if he'd spit out a few more mouthfuls of blood? Luo Qingtong looked at him with amusement, then asked, "Is he from the third elder's faction?" "That's right. Mistress, how did you know?" Chu Lingfeng had a look of surprise on his face that said, "Mistress, you're so amazing." Luo Qingtong burst into laughter. "All right, you should stay here and recuperate. Wait until your bloodline power recovers, then you can go out. Also, I'm going to cancel Snowball's contract. You can contract with it." As Luo Qingtong spoke, she lifted her hand and canceled the contract with Snowball. Chu Lingfeng wanted to stop her, but it was already too late. "No, mistress, how can I steal your contracted beast?" He hurriedly rushed over to stop Luo Qingtong, but she dodged him. "All right, you've been taking care of Snowball all this time. It's better for it to be with you than with me. Besides, in your current situation, Snowball won't be able to contract with you and stay by your side. I'm worried." Luo Qingtong couldn't possibly bring Chu Lingfeng back to the camp. First of all, his bloodline power would recover after it was exhausted, and he couldn't let anyone know about it. Otherwise, it'd be troublesome if someone targeted him in the future. Moreover, the camp was filled with all sorts of people. Luo Qingtong might be able to shut some people up, but she might not be able to shut everyone's mouths. Secondly, Luo Qingtong didn't want others to know about her relationship with Chu Lingfeng for the time being. This blockhead couldn't hide anything on his face. If he were to follow him, he would definitely not be able to resist getting closer to him and listening to him. At that time, wouldn't her identity be exposed immediately? Thinking of the man in her camp who was still kept in the dark, Luo Qingtong felt guilty. Forget it, she'd better be fully prepared before she laid her cards on the table with that man. Luo Qingtong had a toothache when she thought of this. Chu Lingfeng, on the other hand, couldn't change her mind. He immediately contracted Snowball with tears in his eyes. Master, you are so good to me. Luo Qingtong looked at him and couldn't help but laugh. This big blockhead. Luo Qingtong didn't stay in the cave for long. She arranged for Chu Lingfeng to recuperate there. After recovering his bloodline power, she returned to the camp. Not long after she left, Chu Yiqing woke up in the ambush area. He went around asking for Chu Lingfeng and Luo Qingtong's whereabouts. When he found out that the two of them had disappeared without a trace, his face instantly twisted with indescribable malevolence. Find them. Even if you have to turn the entire abandoned continent upside down, you must find Chu Lingfeng and that youth's whereabouts. Chu Yiqing's heart was filled with fear. Chu Lingfeng definitely couldn't leave the abandoned continent alive. Otherwise, he and the Third Elder's people would all be finished. Take me to the other top disciples. His face was cold and gloomy. Now that things had come to this, he could only make a big concession and have the others attack together with him to kill Chu Lingfeng on this abandoned continent. But if they did that, Third Elder's faction would definitely be at a disadvantage in the struggle for the position of direct descendant. Damn it, who was that youth who had suddenly appeared? Chu Yiqing's face was extremely malevolent and terrifying. Chapter 2591. Interesting. That youth just now was really powerful. He was able to easily escape from a group of martial arts realm experts with his strength, not even at the venerable realm. What are those threads in his hands? A middle-aged man sighed. He was surrounded by an extremely powerful and vast aura. If Chu Yiqing and the others were here, they would not be able to help but cry out in shock, because this man's strength was at the earth realm. Not only him, but the people around him were also at this level of cultivation. This kind of strength was not common even in a 4 or 5-star region, let alone a 6-star region. Not to mention a group of people like this. At this moment, these people were looking in the direction that Luo Qingtong and Chu Lingfeng had left. When his voice sounded, a cold and handsome youth in front of the group said in a deep voice, "It's the threads of the 1,000 silkworm." This man's face was handsome and cold, and his entire body was filled with a blade-like aura. He was surrounded by the crowd, and at this moment he said indifferently, "That youth is holding the threads of the 1,000 silkworm." At this point, a look of surprise flashed across his face. It was not because of anything else, but because the threads of the 1,000 silkworm were very difficult to find. Generally speaking, it was basically impossible to capture the 1,000 silkworm alive. This was because this kind of demonic beast was very good at seeking benefits and avoiding danger. Generally speaking, when they found that the situation was unfavorable to them, they would immediately retreat and would never give others a chance to surround and attack them, not to mention being killed by others. Even if someone managed to surround the 1,000 silkworm, it would be impossible for them to obtain its corpse in one piece while being surrounded by its threads. This was because the threads of the 1,000 silkworm were very difficult to deal with. In summary, it was basically very difficult to obtain the threads of the 1,000 silkworm. However, the youth just now took a lot of them. Not only that, but the way she used those threads was very skillful. Zhang Beiyue saw clearly that after the youth broke into the encirclement, she did not suffer any injuries until she left with the man behind her. It was not easy for a youth who was not even at the venerable realm to be able to escape from the encirclement of these human realm guards. Yet she was still unharmed. This young man is indeed very powerful. Zhang Beiyue's expression was indifferent as he looked in the direction Luo Qingtong left. There was obvious admiration in his eyes. Even if he were in Luo Qingtong's position and had the same strength as her, he wouldn't be able to do it. That young man just now was indeed very powerful. His words caused everyone to feel a wave of surprise in their hearts. The threads of the 1,000 silkworms. Oh my God! There's actually someone who can get their hands on that kind of thing. Someone in the crowd exclaimed in a low voice. They naturally knew about the 1,000 silkworms threads. However, no one had expected that the young man would be holding such a thread in his hand. After all, the silk of the 1,000 silkworm was very hard to come by. Even if they went to hunt the 1,000 silkworms, it would be easy to kill them. However, it would be difficult to preserve their corpses and extract the threads from them. He didn't expect that the young man just now could do it. Not only that, she seemed to have a lot of threads in her hands. Chapter 2592. That young man was indeed very powerful. It was a pity that he had matters to attend to in the abandoned continent, and could not divert his attention to other matters. Otherwise, it would not be impossible to recruit her to his side, and become a member of the Jean family. After all, her monstrous and outstanding ability was rare even in the 3-star region. Especially the way she manipulated the threads. If he was not wrong, if the other party was slightly stronger, she could completely strangle all those in the human martial realm here. Jean Bayouet immediately retracted his gaze as he thought of this. He turned to the person beside him and asked, "Those people just now, are they from the Chu family?" "Yes," the middle-aged man replied. He was a little surprised that Jean Bayouet suddenly asked this. Didn't the young master never care about these things? When those people were fighting just now, he did not even look at them. He only began to pay attention after the young man appeared. "Yes," Jean Bayouet responded in a low voice, and did not say anything else. Instead, he asked about other matters. "How's the matter from before? Is there still no trace of the demonic moon sect?" "No." Everyone's expression froze when they heard his words. The middle-aged man from before said, "The abandoned continent has been too chaotic recently. We found traces of the demonic moon sect several times before, but they were all destroyed." When he said this, he immediately frowned. This chaos was naturally because of the Chu and Lian families. Jean Bayouet and the others had appeared on the abandoned continent earlier than the Chu and Lian families. For some reason, the Chu and Lian families did not know of their existence. Jean Bayouet's expression darkened when he heard this. "Then forget it. Don't worry about them for now. Anyway, they're already seriously injured. They can't do anything. The most important thing is that thing. If I'm not wrong, it should be in the heart of the continent. This sky luo grass should have been born from it," Lin Feng said. "If that's the case, then the opening of the heart of the continent will be the best time for us to get it. Let's put other matters aside first." "Yes," the crowd responded in unison. Then, they followed Jean Bayouet's figure and disappeared into the dense forest. After they left, Chu Yuqing and the others didn't know that there was someone in the forest who was watching everything they had done. Meanwhile, on the other side, Luo Qingtong had returned to the campsite. She had just stepped into the camp when she heard a cold voice ringing in her ears. "You're back early." The voice was cold and angry. Luo Qingtong's heart skipped a beat. "Ha, ha. Good morning, brother." Luo Qingtong raised her head guiltily and greeted the man who was striding towards her. She originally wanted to sneak back to the camp, and then sneak back to her tent. Who would have thought that she would meet Yi Qianxian here? This man couldn't have been waiting for her in the camp all this time, right? Luo Qingtong had a toothache when she thought of this. She hadn't forgotten why she had run out of the camp for so long. Haha, she and Yi Qianxian laughed. At this moment, Yi Qianren had already walked to her side. "Good morning." Chapter 2593. Ah, it's already dark? Luo Qingtong's lips twitched as she looked at the dark sky. She didn't know what to say. Oh my god, why is she so easy to say? Cough. Well, I actually wanted to say good evening. Luo Qingtong braced herself and said. Really? Yi Qianming narrowed his eyes. This woman's ability to lie through her teeth was getting better and better. Yes, yes. Luo Qingtong nodded quickly. She was relieved when she saw that Yi Qianming didn't seem to notice the kiss mark on her neck. At this moment, Yi Qianming's voice suddenly sounded. I heard that when people are nervous, it's easy to pant and say the wrong thing. Luo Xiaoqi, what are you nervous about? Yi Qianming raised his eyebrows and looked at Luo Qingtong with a faint smile on his face. Did this woman think that she could get away with it? When she heard Yi Qianming's voice, Luo Qingtong gasped instantly. She looked at Yi Qianming, and her mind was filled with thoughts. Oh my god, oh my god. Did he find out? Did he see through it? But it didn't seem like it. Luo Qingtong imagined the scene when Yi Qianming found the kiss mark on her neck. He would fly into a rage. He would hit her without saying a word. The only thing that didn't happen was this. Did he find out or not? But regardless of whether he found out or not, Luo Qingtong felt that she had to prepare for the worst. Otherwise, if she was really found out, she wouldn't even have a chance to save herself. Luo Qingtong thought so and suddenly coughed softly. She said to Yi Qianming, "Brother, you probably don't know. After we fell asleep last night, a super big mosquito suddenly flew into the tent. I was bitten by the mosquito countless times last night. Were you bitten?" Luo Qingtong looked at Yi Qianming with a hopeful face. She had already thought about it. If Yi Qianming said yes, then it must be because he found the hickeys on his body. At that time, he would just say that it was a mosquito bite, and not admit it even if he was beaten to death. If he said that he didn't, it would mean that he didn't discover anything. It was even better if he didn't find out. He didn't have to worry anymore. When he found out later, he would also think that it was a mosquito bite. She really was a genius. As for Luo Qingtong herself, she had already used the cupping technique to leave a few marks on her body. Although the marks were very different from the hickeys, it was impossible for mosquitoes to only bite one shape. Right? Right. So what if her mosquito pack was different from the rest? Luo Qingtong's words almost made Yi Qianming laugh in anger. Mosquito? That was a really big mosquito. Yi Qianming gritted his teeth as he glared at Luo Qingtong. He almost couldn't hold it in anymore, and wanted to expose Luo Qingtong's identity. Then he would pull her into his arms and tell her how that big mosquito stung people. This woman! To think that she could come up with such an excuse and reason. Yi Qianming took a deep breath. He always felt that this woman was the tribulation in his life. It made him love and hate, anxious and angry. She was really made by God to be his jinx. Otherwise, why would he be so helpless? I wasn't bitten by a mosquito. Hurry up and go back to the tent. Ben, I don't want to wait for you to sleep at night. Yi Qianming's voice was cold, and he finally suppressed the impulse in his heart. If he continued to talk to this woman, he would be angered to death sooner or later. Chapter 2594. Oh, that brother, I've thought about it. I'll sleep in the same tent as them tonight. Otherwise, it'll be too much trouble for you. In fact, Luo Qingtong was afraid of her. Oh my god. She didn't even know that she was sleepwalking in the middle of the night. She thought about how she left a kiss mark on Yi Qianming's body in a daze last night. Who knew what she would do tonight? She'd better keep a distance from Yi Qianming. However, just as she thought of this, she was lifted up by Yi Qianming in an instant and brought back to the tent. Sleep in the same tent as others? Yi Qianming's thin lips curled up slightly. For some reason, he felt like he was grinding his teeth. How can that be? There's still a big mosquito in my tent. Before it leaves, you'd better stay here obediently, lest I'm the only one who gets bitten. After all, that mosquito only appeared after you came. What do you think? Yi Qianming's voice was gloomy. If he didn't have a trace of self-control, and knew that this woman didn't want to reveal her identity, he really would have pressed Luo Qingtong into his arms and kissed her fiercely. This woman still wanted to sleep with others. He didn't allow it before he knew her identity, so it was even more impossible now. She dared to step out of this tent. He would never let her do as she wished. Yi Qianming could do anything for Luo Qingtong. She didn't want to reveal her identity, so he pretended that he didn't know. She was bold and arrogant, so he let her be. As long as this woman was happy, it was fine. But the only thing she couldn't do was to let him lose her. Not to mention sleeping in the same bed with another man. Of course, a woman couldn't do it either. Yi Qianming's eyes were cold, and he directly threw Luo Qingtong onto the bed. The latter's lips twitched, and she didn't know what to say. She really wanted to grab this man and tell him, "The mosquito you're talking about is me. It's me. As long as you let go of me, there won't be any more mosquitoes." But she didn't dare. She was Luo Xiaoqi. Luo Xiaoqi. If she admitted that she had molested Yi Qianming, the consequences would be terrible. She wouldn't be able to bear it at all. Luo Qingtong's lips twitched, and she decided to give up in the end. Forget it. She would sleep here for another night. When there were no more mosquitoes biting him tomorrow, she should be free. At that time, he would have to sleep in another tent, even if he had to sleep with Big Sister Ingyu. Luo Qingtong thought. She covered her head with the quilt and fell asleep. Before going to bed, she did not forget to tie her hands and feet with silk thread. She didn't believe that she would still be able to touch Yi Qianming. For Luo Qingtong, liking Yi Qianming had already become an instinct. It had been such a long time since he had transmigrated. The man had already integrated into her life, just like the other half of her life. She unconsciously wanted to hug him and rely on him. These feelings of love and affection that he had never felt had anything to do with him, had all appeared in front of him. Therefore, she absolutely believed that she would unconsciously touch Yi Qianming after falling asleep in the middle of the night. That was because this man had already melted into her life. Chapter 2595. The girl's figure was petite, and she directly fell into his arms. They fit perfectly, as if they were a match made in heaven. This is the most obedient moment. Yi Qianming snorted and kissed her lips fiercely. Feeling his breath, Luo Qingtong snorted twice and responded to him automatically. Her whole body was desperately trying to squeeze into his arms. His hands also began to move restlessly, but her hands and feet were tied, and she couldn't move for a while. In the end, she could only give up. Her voice was soft, but it was also domineering and proud. She unconsciously fought with Yi Qianming for control of the kiss. The back and forth between the two of them was like a battle between two kings. Of course this time, because Luo Qingtong's hands and feet were tied, Yi Qianming naturally won. He pressed Luo Qingtong on the bed and kissed her carefully. The candlelight and the shadows under the moon were entangled. The next day, Luo Qingtong woke up in Yi Qianming's arms. That's right. In his arms. That wasn't the point. The point was that she took off Yi Qianming's clothes. She took it off. Luo Qingtong looked at everything in front of her in a daze. She looked at her hands grabbing Yi Qianming's clothes. Half of the man's clothes had been pulled down by her. Half of his honey-colored chest and half of his arms, as well as his strong shoulders, were exposed in the air. Yi Qianming's hair was loose and scattered on the bed. At this moment, he was wearing a white jade mask and looking at Luo Qingtong with a dark face. Don't ask her how she could see that his face was dark even with the mask. It was because the low pressure around him was about to freeze into ice, okay? Luo Qingtong looked at her tied hands that were restless. She couldn't touch him and leave a kiss mark, so she actually took off his clothes. Aha! If she had known earlier, she would have tied all 10 of her fingers. Brother, listen to my explanation. Luo Qingtong swallowed her saliva. Oh my god, Yi Qianming was a feast for the eyes. She really wanted to pounce on him. Sob, sob, sob. She had to try her best to resist. Yi Qianming's eyes were cold as he looked at her. Last night, you said you would help me get rid of the mosquitoes. Is this how you do it? As he spoke, he casually raised his hand and pointed at the scratches on his neck and shoulders. Luo Qingtong covered her face. What a beast! What a beast! It was obvious that she wanted to take off Yi Qianming's clothes, but the latter refused, so she caught him. Why did she have to be such a beast? Chasing away mosquitoes? Could these words be any more shameless? Yi Qianming didn't kill her on the spot because her identity was similar to Luo Qingtong. Right? Luo Qingtong rejoiced in her heart that Yi Qianming felt a sense of familiarity when he looked at her. Otherwise, she would probably become a lecherous woman who made a move on her own man and was beaten to death by her own man. *CK. Such a tragic death doesn't suit her at all, especially if she died in the hands of her own man because of molestation. That would be too aggrieving. Brother, listen to my explanation. I really didn't do it on purpose. It's probably because I was poisoned by that mosquito last night. I dreamed that I was the mosquito and skinned you. Brother, I'm completely sincere. At this point, Luo Qingtong was almost touched by herself. F*ck. She was really a genius to be able to lie to this extent. Chapter 2596. Pfft. Yi Qianming's words almost made Luo Qingtong spit out a mouthful of blood. She hurriedly wiped off her saliva. She didn't know what to say about her own deception. Damn. This time, she completely believed Yi Qianming's words. She was definitely the only one who could say the word hubby. It was impossible for Yi Qianming to know these two words. Oh my god. Luo Qingtong covered her face and felt her teeth hurt badly. How was she going to explain the meaning of this word to Yi Qianming? It was simply tearing up. This was simply a big blood pit. And it was the kind of pit that she dug for herself. That actually the word old means that you are very experienced and steady. The word public means that you are very clear about public and private matters. It means that you are fair and impartial. Brother, I have been praising you in my dreams. Are you touched? Luo Qingtong's words became smoother and smoother as she spoke. In the end, she forced herself to explain. I see. Yi Qianming looked at her and smiled slightly. The man's appearance was extremely beautiful. Even if this smile was through the mask and Luo Qingtong couldn't see it at all, she still felt that the other party seemed to be glowing. Then, Luo Xiaoqi, can you tell me what you mean when you say that you are my wife? Yi Qianming's tone was slow. His voice was very slow and his words were very clear. In order to prevent Luo Qingtong from pretending not to hear it, he also directly sent those words into Luo Qingtong's ears. Luo Qingtong's mood at this moment was like thousands of grass mud horses galloping through the Gobi Desert. What kind of mother***er was this? If it weren't for her, she would definitely let the other party know how to write the word death. Yi Qianming was still waiting for Luo Qingtong's answer. Ever since he heard Luo Qingtong's nonsense about the word husband, he immediately knew that the meaning of this word was definitely not as simple as it seemed on the surface. It was very likely that there was a deeper meaning that Luo Qingtong couldn't say. That was why this woman gave a random explanation. The more she explained, the more she hid. Yi Qianming was in a very good mood at this moment. So much so that Luo Qingtong couldn't answer, and ran away without catching her. Because he already got the answer he wanted, Luo Qingtong ran out of the tent, and still didn't wake up from her trapping. Damn, this was simply too much of a trap. Damn it, she was really speechless. Fortunately, she ran away, otherwise she would have died. ****. Not far away, when Bei Qing and Feng Yu saw Luo Qingtong rushing out of Yi Qianming's tent, the corners of their lips twitched. Master is teasing the evil doctor again. If the evil doctor finds out. Feng Yu touched his forehead and had a terrible headache. The two of them already knew the truth from Yi Qianming. It was mainly because they were prepared to die to persuade Yi Qianming not to abandon the evil doctor. But the truth thrown out by Yi Qianming almost made them dizzy. Luo Xiaoqi was the evil doctor. She deliberately ate the small illusion pill to disguise her identity. The two of them were dumbfounded when they heard it. On one hand, they admired the evil doctor's tricks. On the other hand, they were depressed that their master and the evil doctor had already recognized each other. Why didn't they recognize each other? They were still having fun. Not only that, their master didn't let them recognize the evil doctor. How long were the two of them going to play around like this? Master, do you know that you have been led astray by the evil doctor? Chapter 2597. He was wearing a simple white robe, which made him look like an immortal. At this moment, his feet were lightly tapped on a tree branch. He stood in the middle of a forest, and looked at the group of figures in front of him indifferently. People from the demonic moon sect. His face was indifferent, and his eyes were very indifferent. However, the meaning of his words made the hearts of the people in front tremble. Who are you? The group of demonic moon sect people in front of him shouted fiercely. The injuries in their group were very serious. Almost all of them were injured. If the people from the Chu and Lian families had not come to the abandoned continent and made it noisy, they would not have been able to escape from the hands of Zhang Beiyue and the others. After all, in this abandoned continent, they were seriously injured and could not be compared to Zhang Beiyue and the other elite disciples of the three-star Zhan family. The demonic moon sect was an evil sect in the three-star Great Heaven domain. Its strength was almost the same as the Zhan family. Logically speaking, they should not have been forced to such an extent by Zhan Beiyue and the others. However, the mistake was that they did not know that Zhan Beiyue and the others had come to the abandoned continent with a great conspiracy. Therefore, after seeing the actions of Zhan Beiyue and the others, they quietly followed and did not bring the most elite disciples of their family. On the other hand, Zhan Beiyue was the first young master of the Zhan family. He was the strongest genius of this generation of the Zhan family. His strength was comparable to an ordinary elder with real power. Moreover, the people he led were also the most elite disciples of the Zhan family. In this way, the demonic moon sect people suffered a great loss when facing Zhan Beiyue and the others. If the people from the Chu and Lian families had not arrived and discovered the Tianluo grass, they would not have been able to escape. Later on, the Chu clan and Lian clan were able to successfully spread the news of the Tianluo grass to the outside world because of their help. If they had not held back Zhan Beiyue and the others, the people from the Chu and Lian families would have died long ago. However, even so, they could not leave the abandoned continent at this moment. Not to mention, they already knew that the purpose of Zhan Beiyue and the others was in the heart of the continent. It was very likely that they had discovered a peerless treasure. Under such circumstances, how could the demonic moon sect members let the matter rest? But now that they were seriously injured, there was nothing they could do. At this moment Yu Mingqian appeared. Everyone looked at Yu Mingqian warily. They didn't know how Yu Mingqian had seen through their identities and found them. Yu Mingqian didn't care about their gazes at all. He stood on the tree branch and looked at the people of the demonic moon sect coldly. He said, "You don't have to be afraid of what I will do to you. I'm not interested in trash like you." Someone from the three-star region? To Yu Mingqian, the young master of the Inscription City's Federation of Trade Unions, it wasn't even worth mentioning. The reason he was able to discover the demonic moon sect's traces was naturally because he had sensed their tyrannical aura, which was different from that of the Chu and Lian families. With the help of the inscription man-seeking array, he easily found their whereabouts. Yu Mingqian wasn't interested in why people from the three-star domain would appear on the abandoned continent of the six-star domain. Chapter 2598. Luo Qingtong was getting closer and closer to Yi Qianxian. She might not have noticed it, but Yu Mingqian could tell that she was treating Yi Qianxian and the others differently. The other party and those white jade-masked men knew each other. Not only that, but Luo Qingtong had also recognized the white-masked men. Yu Mingqian was very afraid of Yi Qianxian's strength. He regretted not attacking Luo Qingtong when they were in the Heavenly Wind Mercenary City. At that time, she had not fully come into contact with the white-masked men, and she did not recognize them. Under such circumstances, it was best to attack Luo Qingtong. But he missed the opportunity. Now he could only rely on these evil moon sect members. "I can treat your injuries, and I can also help you improve your strength. As long as you promise me one thing." Yu Mingqian looked at the evil moon sect members. He believed that they would agree. After all, he was the only one on the abandoned continent who could help them. Looking at their current situation, there were obviously other enemies on the abandoned continent. They had no other choice but to promise him. Yu Mingqian's words made the evil moon sect members even more surprised. "Why should we believe you?" a ferocious-looking evil moon sect member said. He looked covetously and greedily at Yu Mingqian's fairy-like face. He laughed ferociously and said, "Since you've said it so clearly, you pretty boy, then we'll capture you and force the method out of you. Isn't that the same?" As he spoke, he looked at Yu Mingqian with a ferocious expression and said, "Look at your delicate skin. I'm afraid you can't withstand a few rounds of torture. If you know what's good for you, hand over the method immediately. We might be able to give you some comfortable punishment." As he spoke, he laughed arrogantly with a smug look on his face. These evil moon sect members were originally from an evil sect. They did not have any taboos or bottom lines. Yu Mingqian had come alone. Although they were a little afraid, after carefully inspecting the surroundings and finding that there was no ambush and only Yu Mingqian, they immediately relaxed. Not to mention, although Yu Mingqian's temperament was extraordinary, it didn't have any deterrence or threat. Seeing that there was no trace of cultivation on his body, the group of demonic moon sect members felt disdain in their hearts. They were indeed seriously injured, but not just anyone could order them around. Since this immortal-like man wanted to make use of them, then don't blame them for being ruthless. Wouldn't it be better to capture him and slowly force him to confess his methods than to agree to his request? Why do I have to do as he says? The other party was really like a celestial being who was above the mortal world. He was really too naive. The man from the demonic moon sect was pleased with himself. The others also remained silent, tacitly agreeing with that person's actions. Their figures spread out and surrounded Yu Minglong. Seeing this scene, Yu Mingqian's eyes, which were as light as colored glass, suddenly blossomed. The coldness in them was extremely strong. Interesting. You people really don't know what's good for you. Chapter 2599. His aura completely changed the moment he made his move. An extremely cold and murderous power suddenly bloomed from his body. At the same time, an inscription pattern in his hand rushed toward the demonic moon sect member in front of him. The inscription pattern also appeared. In an instant, the sound of countless weapons whistling could be heard from it. In an instant, the demonic moon sect member seemed to be in a blood-red azure field. His surroundings were filled with weapons and traps. Battle formation initial appearance, turning void into reality, place of death. Battle inscription mark. Are you a battle soul master? Or are you a battle soul master who can turn the surrounding murderous aura into weapons? Everyone's faces were filled with shock. There were strong and weak battle soul masters. In addition to the battle inscription pattern and their own cultivation strength, there was another way. It was based on the depth and research of the battle inscription pattern. When an ordinary battle soul master controlled the battle inscription pattern, he could at most manifest the murderous aura in the battle inscription pattern. They could either turn into the shadows of swords or shrieking beasts. There were many different kinds of murderous aura. However, there was a type of battle soul master who, after deep research, could turn the battle inscription pattern in his hand into a death trap, trapping and killing the enemy he wanted to deal with there. That was not a level that an ordinary battle soul master could achieve. That would require an even more profound inscription ability. Not only that, but strength and cultivation were also indispensable. For such a battle soul master, unless his enemy's strength was far above his, he could break through 10,000 spells with brute force. Otherwise, once trapped by the death trap formed by his battle inscription pattern, it would be a situation of instant death. It was like being trapped in the domain of a sky martial realm expert. Life and death were in his hands. Just as everyone was thinking this, they heard the demonic moon sect member, who was trapped by the death trap, formed by Yu Ming's battle inscription pattern, scream shrilly. Then, everyone saw that he was imprisoned in mid-air. Then, countless weapons pierced his heart in an instant. Not only that, his body seemed to be suspended by an invisible force. While hanging there, countless weapons flew past. While piercing his heart, they did not forget to slice off his flesh piece by piece. His blood-curdling screams were shrill, but in an instant, he turned into a pile of white bones. Under the horrified gazes of the crowd, the demonic moon sect member, who had turned into a pile of bones, was still alive. What a hair-raising way to die! Everyone's eyes were filled with extreme fear. You are a battle soul master, you. Who are you? They looked at the man in front of them, who looked like he was floating in the air, and had no lethality at all. Yu Mingqian had completely retracted her power. She had returned to her previous powerless state. However, the crowd had just witnessed him killing the demonic moon sect member. How could they still dare to treat him as a weakling? At that moment his heart was trembling with fear. Their strength had not recovered yet. All of them were seriously injured. They were no match for Yu Mingqian. Moreover, even if they had recovered their strength, the death trap formed by the battle inscription pattern Yu Mingqian had just revealed was not enough. Chapter 2600. What was going on? How could there be such a terrifying figure in this six-star region's abandoned continent? Given his strength, he could easily sweep across this abandoned continent. Why would he need them to do something for him? Everyone was trembling in fear as they looked at Yu Mingqian and asked, "My lord, could it be that you're also here because of the news that the Zhan family obtained? If that's the case, we're willing to be your lackeys." Their words made Yu Mingqian raise his eyebrows slightly. News from the Zhan family? He originally didn't care why these people from the demonic moon sect had come. However, after hearing what they were saying, it seemed like their purpose in coming to this abandoned continent wasn't simple. "Yes," a member of the demonic moon sect said with trepidation. "The Zhan family seems to have obtained news about an ancient godly item. The ancient godly item is in this abandoned continent. It's very likely that it has something to do with the changes in the heart of the continent and the birth of the sky grass. They quietly appeared in this abandoned continent and sealed off all information. It was by chance that we discovered their movements and followed them. We were accidentally discovered by them. Those people from the Zhan family are currently chasing after us. My lord, if you're also here for the ancient godly item, we're willing to listen to your orders." The member of the demonic moon sect smiled at Yu Mingqian ingratiatingly. In their opinion, Yu Mingqian's strength was tyrannical, yet he had hidden it. Since he had appeared in this abandoned continent alone, he must be here for the ancient godly item, just like them. In that case, they would naturally listen to his orders. After all, they were no match for him. They also mistook Yu Mingqian's request for them to listen to his orders and help him obtain the ancient godly item in the heart of the continent. Ancient godly item? Yu Mingqian's eyes narrowed slightly. That pair of eyes that were as light as colored glass was filled with surprise. He hadn't expected that he would receive such news when he had just randomly found some people to attack Luo Qingtong. However, he didn't know if these people's information was true or false. If it was really an ancient divine object, it would not be a bad idea to obtain it. In this world, anything that had even the slightest bit of information about God was a 1 in a million treasure. However, it was really surprising that such a treasure would appear on a small abandoned continent in a small six-star region. Yu Mingqian's words, coupled with the meaning in his eyes, made the demonic moon sect members realize that they had guessed wrongly. This man with astonishing strength actually didn't come for the ancient divine object. They had spilled the beans. If he had known earlier, he wouldn't have opened his mouth. That way, after they had gained the support of the other party and gained strength, they could then snatch the ancient divine object. Everyone was vexed in their hearts, but they didn't dare to show it on their faces. Yu Mingqian glanced at them and said, "We'll talk about the ancient divine object later. What I want you to do is something else." He told her about Luo Qingtong. "It's this young man named Luo Shaoqi. I want you to capture him. Leave it to me." Chapter 2601. He didn't know if the ancient divine objects mentioned by these people were true or false, but the news about Luo Shaoqi's divine inscriptions was basically confirmed. Naturally, he knew what was more important. As soon as Yu Mingqian's words came out, the people of the evil moon sect looked at each other in dismay. They looked at Yu Mingqian, not understanding why he didn't do it himself. It was just a young man. However, they didn't dare to ask any more questions when they saw Yu Mingqian's gaze. Yu Mingqian's methods were too ruthless and terrifying. They all had a shadow in their hearts. This master was probably not an ordinary ruthless, cold, and ruthless person. As the crowd thought this, they immediately agreed, not daring to say a word. After Yu Mingqian glanced at them coldly, he took out some elixirs and handed them to the people of the evil moon sect. The latter and the others originally wanted to say that the spirit qi in the abandoned continent had a corrosive effect, so the elixirs had no effect. However, when they saw the elixirs that Yu Mingqian took out, they were surprised. This was because the elixirs that Yu Mingqian took out were actually effective. Although they were very weak, they were effective in the end. This was more important than anything else. After all, as long as they were effective, taking more of them would be equivalent to the effect of an elixir. As the crowd thought this, they immediately took the elixirs and swallowed them. Yu Mingqian looked at them coldly, not saying anything. Ordinary elixirs naturally had no effect. However, the elixirs that Yu Mingxian had were the top elixirs of the Inscription Association. Not only that, but they were also supported by his medicinal inscription technique. The retention effect was comparable to the super-perfect elixirs, refined by Luo Qingtong. Under such circumstances, the elixirs that he took out were naturally effective. It was just that they were not as effective as the elixirs refined by Luo Qingtong. However, they still had a healing effect on the injuries of the people of the Evil Moon sect. Not only that, but Yu Mingxian also asked the people of the Evil Moon sect to take off their clothes. All of their bodies were engraved with inscription arrays that could increase their strength and concentrate all their potential into one point. After doing all this, Yu Mingxian floated away, leaving the people of the Evil Moon sect behind. They looked at his back in shock and fear. The other party was simply too terrifying. She was a perfect example of what it meant to have the appearance of an immortal, but the heart of a snake. No one dared to stay here any longer. After Yu Mingxian left, they quickly left as well. Before he left, he did not forget to kill the demonic Moon sect member, who was still lying on the ground. That's right. The Evil Moon sect member, who had attacked Yu Mingxian, was still alive, even after being reduced to a pile of bones. Yu Mingquan's vicious methods could be seen. While Yu Mingxian was going to meet the Evil Moon sect, Luo Qingtong was also living in an abyss of suffering. There was no other reason. After she explained to Yi Qianming what hubby meant, the latter took a fancy to this title and asked her to stop calling him brother and call him hubby. What kind of husband was this? He was a man. Calling him hubby. This scene was simply unbearable to the eyes. However, she couldn't refute Yi Qianming's reason. Didn't you say that was a compliment? Or are you just trying to trick me? Yi Qianming's voice was cold. Chapter 2602. If she admitted it, wouldn't this man think that she was scolding him last night? So she deliberately pinched and pulled him, and deliberately took off his clothes? Luo Qingtong thought so, and could only succumb to her own deception. If she knew that this would be the result, even if she was beaten to death, she wouldn't have interpreted the word husband in such a way. At most, Yi Qianming would teach her a lesson. Anyway, he wouldn't do anything to her because her body was similar to Luo Qingtong. Luo Qingtong's heart was madly biting her handkerchief, but on the surface, she called Yi Qianming weakly husband. Her voice was soft and feeble, without an ounce of strength. But in Yi Qianming's ears, it was unusually pleasing to the ear. The meaning of this title was indeed very different. For some reason, when Yi Qianming heard Luo Qingtong call him like this, his heart inexplicably softened. He only felt that the girl's voice was very pleasant to the ear. In fact, in order to be able to match the identity of Luo Shaoqi, Luo Qingtong deliberately lowered her voice and changed it into a slightly hoarse voice of a teenager. It was completely different from soft and pleasant to the ears. But Yi Qianming felt that it was indescribably pleasant to the ear. Well, call me again. Yi Qianming felt comfortable in his heart, but he didn't show it on his face. He wore a white jade mask on his face and looked at Luo Qingtong with narrowed eyes. Aren't you praising me? I can't hear it clearly in my dream. I think you can call me a few more times during the day. Luo Qingtong really cursed in her heart. She even suspected that Yi Qianming was deliberately messing with her. Did this man find out that her previous explanation was completely fooling him? Luo Qingtong thought so and instantly felt a toothache. But she couldn't expose Yi Qianming. After all, she was the one who fooled Yi Qianming first. If she exposed him, wouldn't she be giving Yi Qianming something that could be used against her? At that time, the other party would have a chance to deal with her. Luo Qingtong thought so and instantly decided to give up the righteousness for the sake of the greater good. Anyway, Yi Qianming and the others didn't know what the word husband meant. She could call him that. Anyway, in the end, she wouldn't be the one who would be embarrassed. With that thought in mind, Luo Qingtong called him husband a few times. In the end, the more she called him husband, the smoother it got. She almost called him husband. When Yi Qianming heard her calling him husband again and again, his eyes behind the mask couldn't help but soften. This woman, If only she was so obedient when she was by his side. Usually, she was used to putting on an act, but when it came to tricking people, she became obedient in all kinds of ways. Yi Qianming for a while. Then, when Luo Qingtong was resting, he said calmly, "Yes, thank you for the compliment." When he said this, his thin lips suddenly hooked up. Then he narrowed his eyes and said to Luo Qingtong word by word, "Old woman." When he said this, Luo Qingtong, who was taking a breath, was caught off guard and almost choked to death on her own saliva. Cough, cough, cough. She coughed violently and stared at Yi Qianming. Did this damned man even know what the word wife meant? He actually called her wife. She was Luo Shaoqi. Brother, you can't call her wife so casually. Chapter 2603. It doesn't matter. Yi Qianming looked indifferent. Since husband is a compliment, wife should be the same, right? Of course, I don't know how to explain the word wife, but obviously Luo Xiaoqi, you know it, right? Yi Qianming snorted and looked at Luo Qingtong. For some reason, Luo Qingtong inexplicably heard joy from his words. Did this man think that wife was a curse word? Did he want to get back at her for what happened last night? Silly man, you've sold yourself. Luo Qingtong looked at Yi Qianming's twitching lips and didn't know what to say. Forget it, let him be happy. Alas, it was all because she cheated him. Otherwise, there wouldn't be such a thing at all. Luo Qingtong thought so and felt powerless in an instant. She scratched the wall in her heart and then said with twitching lips, "Brother, as long as you are happy." What else was there to say about her man? Of course, she had to pamper him even if she had to kneel down. Who asked her to cheat him first? But even if this man wanted to get back at her, he had to understand the matter clearly first. Wasn't this sending herself to him to be molested? Fortunately, he called her wife. If he called someone else, that scene was too beautiful, she didn't dare to look at it. Luo Qingtong's lips twitched, and her heart was extremely tangled. How could she tell Yi Qianming that the word wife wasn't a curse word? It wasn't the word husband either? Damn it. Just when she was feeling depressed, Yi Qianming's heart was particularly comfortable. These two words were indeed very different. How long had it been since he saw Luo Qingtong change her expression so much? This woman deserved to be taught a lesson. Yi Qianming's heart was happy. Looking at the obvious depression on Luo Qingtong's face, he immediately turned and left. By the way, his words swept over Luo Qingtong from behind. The clothes that you said you would mend for me, mend as soon as possible. I'll wait. After hearing Yi Qianming's words, Luo Qingtong was even more certain that he was trying to get back at her for what happened last night. Supplement my ass. Luo Qingtong had a toothache when she thought of that stupid dress. Previously, she had taken it out with great ambition and said that after it was repaired, she would be able to gain Yi Qianming's favor. In the end, Luo Qingtong's lips twitched at the thought of the sleeve that had been pricked by her like a hornet. Was it too late to pretend that he didn't hear anything? However, it was clear that Yi Qianming knew her very well. Give it to me this evening. Otherwise, Yi Qianming didn't finish his words, but Luo Qingtong already knew the consequences. In short, this man would not let her off so easily. God knows if he would grab her and force her to mend his clothes on the spot. At that time, she could forget about getting any better. One by one, he would make up for it until he died. That man had said before that if she didn't mend it well, he still had a lot of clothes. Luo Qingtong originally thought that she could move out of Yi Qianming's tent tonight and live somewhere else. After all, there were no more mosquitoes. She even took off his clothes. No matter how she looked at it, it was impossible for her to live in his tent anymore. But in the end, this happened again. Luo Qingtong's heart was filled with tears. She gloomily took out the clothes from her storage ring and stared blankly at the holes that she had made. Damn it, the more you mend, the worse it gets. How was she going to tell Yi Qianming? Chapter 2604. Not far away, Beiqing and Fengyu, who had heard the conversation between Luo Qingtong and Yi Qianxian, looked very excited. Mending clothes? The evil doctor? Before they knew that Luo Qingtong was Luo Shaoqi, They didn't think it was a big deal to ask her to mend clothes. But now that they knew that Luo Qingtong was Luo Shaoqi, they felt very uneasy. With the evil doctor's character, they had no doubt that she would kill decisively and endlessly cheat people. But mending clothes? The corners of their lips twitched, and then they secretly looked in the direction of Luo Qingtong. When they saw the clothes in her hand, whose sleeves were no longer visible, the two of them looked as if they had been struck by lightning, but also felt that it was just as they had expected. Oh my God, she poked the sleeves like that. If Bei Qing and Feng Yu didn't know that Luo Qingtong was Luo Shaoqi, they would have thought that she had a grudge against their master and wanted to poke the clothes as if they were their master. The two of them covered their faces, and their expressions were even more hopeless than Luo Qingtong's. Great. The evil doctor's mending skills were so terrible that they couldn't bear to look at it. What would she give to their master later? By then, their master would have another chance to bully the evil doctor. Master, you have to take it easy, Don't accidentally go overboard. By then, when you and the evil doctor have a conflict, we will be the unlucky ones. The two of them were indescribably hopeless, but Luo Qingtong didn't feel it at all. At this moment, she was looking at the clothes in her hand with a frown. Looking at the sleeves that had almost been poked to death by her, she really felt a twinge of pain in her heart. Why was this needlework so difficult? When she used the threads of the 1,000 silkworms to deal with the enemies, she was simply invincible. Those strong guards in the human martial arts realm couldn't even think about getting close to her. But when it came to this place, it was also needlework, but the mending of clothes was so difficult, so difficult. Luo Qingtong's eyes widened. Her blood-red eyes had clearly seen how the threads should be threaded, but when she started to move her hands and the threads didn't listen to her. The stitches were also crooked. Luo Qingtong had no choice but to tear and poke again and again. And then it became like this. If Luo Qingtong didn't have her blood-red eyes and dodge in time, her 10 fingers might have been poked into pieces together with the sleeves. Thinking of this, Luo Qingtong suddenly looked at the clothes in her hand gloomily. All of a sudden, her eyes lit up and she smiled. I've got it. She smiled as she looked at the clothes in her hands. Then she hugged it and walked back into the tent. Looking at her leaving figure, Bei Qing and Feng Yu felt a headache coming on. What idea did the evil doctor come up with this idea? Every time they watched their master and the evil doctor fight, they felt so tired. Having two masters who were so naughty, their hearts were bitter. Bei Qing and Feng Yu's expressions were very interesting. They couldn't help but pray that the two of them wouldn't go overboard. Their hearts were too weak and couldn't withstand too much stimulation, while Bei Qing and Feng Yu were praying in the tent. Chapter 2605. That woman definitely didn't expect him to do this, right? Yi Qianming's heart was filled with joy. He was already looking forward to Luo Qingtong's expression when she came back at night. He wondered what that woman would do at that time. Would she come to him pitifully and beg him? Yi Qianming chuckled. He finally knew why Luo Qingtong was so naughty in the past. This feeling was not bad at all. Especially when he looked at Luo Qingtong. He felt depressed, but he couldn't do anything to her. Yi Qianming's heart was filled with joy. The smile on his lips was getting bigger and bigger. At this moment, Luo Qingtong excitedly hugged the clothes in her hands and walked in from outside. Cough, brother, I've mended your clothes. She deliberately emphasized the word mended. Luo Qingtong's face was full of smiles, and she was very happy. Yi Qianming looked at the smile on her face and suddenly raised his eyebrows. So fast. His expression was indifferent, and at the same time, he was a little curious. Didn't those people from the Red Flame mercenary group clearly say that this woman didn't know how to mend clothes? How could it be mended so quickly? Let me have a look. Looking at the bright smile on the young man's face that even the huge birthmark couldn't hide, Yi Qianming raised his eyebrows and reached out his hand to Luo Qingtong. Okay, Luo Qingtong said, and handed the clothes in her hands to Yi Qianming with a smile. Yi Qianming unfolded the clothes in his hands and looked at the sleeves that were almost poked into a sieve. He was silent for a while. You've mended it? The fate of this sleeve was simply too tragic. But Yi Qianming noticed the clothes in his hands that were still separated from the sleeves. This woman just gave it to him like this. Was she trying to renege on her promise? Yi Qianming raised his eyebrows slightly and snorted coldly as he looked at Luo Qingtong. Of course not. This way it's mended. As Luo Qingtong spoke, she reached out and cut the other sleeve of the shirt in Yi Qianming's hand symmetrically. This time, the two sleeves of the robe were cut short. When Luo Qingtong made her move, she didn't forget to cut off the part of the other sleeve that was torn by her. Both sleeves would be the same short. Yi Qianming looked at the clothes that had suddenly changed from a long robe to a short robe. However, because the style of the clothes did not match, it looked neither fish nor fowl. The veins on his forehead throbbed. This woman. Is this what you mean by mending? He gritted his teeth. She had cut off the sleeves of his robe, leaving his arms bare. Was this considered mending? Yeah. Luo Qingtong looked at him with a smile and said with a sly and proud face, You didn't say what you wanted. What do you think? I even helped you change the style of your robe. Is it okay to make it like this? Brother, I'm very sincere. As Luo Qingtong said this, the smile on her face became more cheerful. She was truly a genius, who said that mending clothes could only be done by sewing. She had cut off the sleeves on both sides and changed it into another style of clothing. It was considered mending. This was a good idea that Luo Qingtong had thought for a long time just now. At this moment, she felt a burst of joy in her heart and looked at Yi Qianming with a happy face. Yi Qianming looked at her proud and sly expression and really tried to restrain himself. In the end, he couldn't help but pull her into his arms. Chapter 2606. He gritted his teeth and said word by word. He was almost angered to death by Luo Qingtong. But soon, he seemed to have thought of something, and his lips curled up. Then he looked at her and snorted. Since you've done so well, I'm not a stingy person. Let's forget about what happened last night. You can continue to stay here tonight. Pfft. When Yi Qianming said this, Luo Qingtong almost choked on her own saliva. What? She looked at Yi Qianming with a dumbfounded expression. She didn't expect things to develop like this. She had solved the problem of the clothes. Shouldn't she not have to stay here tonight and continue to sew clothes? Why didn't this man play his cards according to the rules? Yi Qianming's heart was filled with joy. He was even happier with Luo Qingtong's dumbfounded expression. He let this woman be so proud. He finally shot himself in the foot, didn't he? Yi Qianming suddenly had a flash of inspiration and thought of such a reason. It seemed that the effect was surprisingly good. He snorted and looked at Luo Qingtong's expression. What? You don't want to? Do you feel that your clothes aren't mended well? Yi Qianming put emphasis on the word, not good, and paused. He raised his eyebrows and snorted. Since that's the case, then you can continue to mend clothes. In short, she could choose between mending clothes and sleeping. When Yi Qianming said this, Luo Qingtong's lips twitched. Damn! When did Yi Qianming become so difficult to deal with? Luo Qingtong listened to his words and really couldn't refute. In short, no matter what, she still had to stay here tonight. Luo Qingtong deeply suspected that Yi Qianming was doing this because of last night. No, it was very likely that he was taking revenge on her for what happened last night. Otherwise, why would he suddenly ask her to sew clothes? After she found a way to get away with it, he didn't let her have an easy time and asked her to continue to stay in this tent. Luo Qingtong didn't believe that Yi Qianming didn't see that she wanted to leave here and sleep elsewhere. F***ck. He had really shot himself in the foot. If he had known earlier, Luo Qingtong had known this for a long time, but she didn't know where to start. He had done too many bad things in the past. Was this his retribution? Luo Qingtong was really speechless. She was the first person in history to have been tricked by him so miserably. I got it, she mumbled. She was already thinking about what she should do to make herself more obedient tonight. She really couldn't stand the stimulation of sleepwalking and molesting Yi Qianming every night after she fell asleep. She was hiding her identity. Did his body have to be so unreliable? If this continued, she really wouldn't be able to hide her identity, no matter how powerful she was. She really didn't want Yi Qianming to know her identity on this abandoned continent for the time being. Luo Qingtong's heart was tangled. However, Yi Qianming's heart was filled with joy. He was already thinking about how he should let this woman molest him tonight. Should he continue to leave kiss marks, or let this woman tear his clothes? Yi Qianming's heart was filled with joy, and the curve of his lips became even wider. While he and Luo Qingtong were having a battle of wits and courage, having fun. A few days later, boom. Chapter 2607. Along with this violent explosion, in the distant sky, there was a lot of hustle and bustle, as well as a thick cloud of smoke. The smoke swept away the decaying spiritual qi in the sky above the abandoned continent. The boiling and roaring aura revealed absolute vitality and incomparable power. It's the power of the heart of the continent. Chu Xiaofeng and the others rushed out of their tents when they sensed the rising power. Yi Qianxian also appeared in the sky above their tents. He looked at the center of the rising power in front of him. That was where the heart of the continent stopped and opened this time. This vigorous and powerful power was the remnant power of the great Tao left behind by the heart of the continent. It was precisely because of this vigorous force that this continent, which should have been abandoned, was able to nurture the Tianluo grass again. The other withered and corroded spiritual herbs were able to radiate new vitality. Master, this power seems to be very different from the rest. Bei Qing, Feng Yu, and the others appeared beside Yi Qianxian and whispered to him. Since all abandoned continents were already decaying and were about to die, the remaining power in the heart of the continent would definitely not be this strong. After all, it was already an arrow at the end of its flight. If there were no special circumstances, the final outcome of those abandoned continents that had already reached the end of their road, without exception, would be the complete exhaustion of the vitality in the heart of the continent. Then, they would disintegrate in the starry sky, turning into dust and air. However, the power emitted by the heart of the continent was unusually tyrannical and powerful. It was hard to believe that this was an abandoned continent that was about to disintegrate and scatter into the starry sky, just by looking at the intense power of the continent's core. Instead, it seemed like a supercontinent that was at its peak, filled with vitality, and was about to evolve and evolve again. Yes, that's indeed the case. Yi Qianxian narrowed his eyes. He looked at the heart of the continent. The power of the heart of the continent gave him a completely different feeling. This was not a power that the heart of the continent, which was about to die, could possess. There must have been something that they had not expected to happen in the process. He didn't expect that he would encounter such a situation when he came to the abandoned continent to get a stalk of Tianluo grass to stabilize his injuries, because he couldn't find Luo Qingtong. The thing in the heart of the continent was definitely not simple. This trip to the sky Luo grass would not be so easy. However, Yi Qianxian wasn't particularly worried. At worst, he would just reveal his true identity and strength. To Yi Qianxian, the reason why he had concealed his identity in every possible way was not because he was afraid that the people of Tiandu would come looking for him. Instead, he didn't want them to cause trouble on his way to find Luo Qingtong. Moreover, if he was busy dealing with them, how would he have enough time to look for Luo Qingtong? There was also the hidden danger of his heavenly veins body, which was indeed troublesome, but that was all there was to it. Now that Luo Qingtong was by his side, he was not afraid of the people from Tiandu. As long as Luo Qingtong could cure the hidden danger in his body, even if Emperor Tiandu came, he would not be afraid. Chapter 2608. He would let that woman misunderstand him for the time being. Yi Qianxian really liked how Luo Qingtong cared about him and protected him. It warmed his heart. Moreover, that woman was so cunning and willful. She was Luo Shaoqi, so she was unusually obedient because she didn't want to expose her identity. Yi Qianxian hadn't had his fill yet. How could he let her know the truth so soon? His face darkened when he thought of how she used to make him jump in anger. But he couldn't bear to punish her. This time, it was time for him to collect some interest and gain back some face. As Yi Qianren thought about it, she snorted and turned to look at Luo Qingtong. Luo Qingtong was also looking at the scene in the sky. The power of the heart of the continent was rising. Luo Qingtong wasn't as strong as Yi Qianxian and the others, who could see that the power of the heart of the continent was different at a glance. However, her blood-red eyes were spinning. She could tell that something was wrong from the analysis of the power. The power of the heart of the continent was too strong. It was far more powerful than the power of the heart of the continent emitted by ordinary abandoned continents. The heart of the continent was so powerful. Could it be that there was some kind of treasure hidden in the heart of the continent that caused such a change? If that was the case, then their group had really made the right choice by coming here. Luo Qingtong knew that if there was really such a treasure that could make the heart of the continent, which was about to die, emit such a terrifying power, then its value was far beyond ordinary treasures. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that if news of this treasure were to spread, not to mention the Chu family and the Lian family, even the big families and forces of the three-star domain and above would come. However, the Heavenly Wind Chu clan and the Flying Star Lian clan had coincidentally sealed off the news of this abandoned continent, so no one else knew about it. This treasure would most likely be theirs to take advantage of. Luo Qingtong's lips curled up at this thought. But soon, she saw Yi Qianxian's gaze and the smile on her face immediately disappeared. Oh my God! She did not know how to face Yi Qianxian anymore. These days, Luo Qingtong had been living in an abyss of suffering. Her sleepwalking was so bad that it made people's hair stand on end. Luo Qingtong woke up every morning in Yi Qianxian's arms. There was even one time when she tied her hands and feet together. When she finally woke up, Luo Qingtong was horrified. Her lips were less than a centimeter away from Yi Qianxian's lips. She was so close to kissing him. Oh my God! Was she that thirsty? Yi Qianxian, on the other hand, coldly told her that she had suddenly woken up in the middle of the night and said that she wanted to bite him to death. The man narrowed his eyes. I was curious how you were going to bite me to death. In the end, you woke up. Yi Qianxian's voice was calm, but Luo Qingtong felt like dying. Oh my God! This bite was not a bite at all. Luo Qingtong was certain that if she hadn't woken up in time, she would have pounced on Yi Qianxian and bitten him left and right. Oh my God! Even with her hands and feet tied, she couldn't stop herself from defying the heavens. Chapter 2609. Luo Qingtong's heart was indescribably tangled, but she didn't notice that Yi Qianxian's eyes were dark as he stared at Luo Qingtong's slightly swollen lips. This woman woke up faster than he expected. Fortunately, he pulled away in time and made up an excuse. Otherwise, they would have been discovered. In the next few days, no matter how many methods Luo Qingtong thought of, even if she desperately wanted to move out of Yi Qianxian's tent and stay in her own tent, when she finally woke up, she would still appear in Yi Qianxian's tent. This time, it was even more outrageous. She directly slept on Yi Qianxian's body. On his body, meeting Luo Qingtong's shocked gaze, Yi Qianxian's expression was indifferent, and his tone was indescribably innocent. I was sleeping well in the tent, and you ran back on your own. You still insisted on sleeping in my tent. There weren't enough beds, so you climbed up on your own. You even cried and pulled, and refused to leave no matter what. As Yi Qianxian spoke, he raised his hand and pointed to the two sides of the wooden bed, where Luo Qingtong's fingers had left fingerprints due to excessive force. Looking at the 10 fingerprints that fit perfectly with her fingers, Luo Qingtong was on the verge of breaking down. She actually ran back to Yi Qianxian's tent, cried and pulled, and refused to leave? Luo Qingtong completely couldn't imagine that she would do such a thing. But the truth was right in front of her eyes. These 10 fingerprints were clearly her own. And she appeared in Yi Qianxian's tent. It couldn't be that Yi Qianxian carried her over, right? In fact, it really was like this. After Luo Qingtong fell asleep, Yi Qianxian carried her over. After being together for so long, Luo Qingtong had long been accustomed to Yi Qianxian's embrace. So when Yi Qianxian picked her up, not only did she not wake up at all, but she also snuggled into the man's embrace to make him more comfortable. The 10 fingerprints on the wooden bed were also pressed by Yi Qianxian when he held her hand. With his strength, it would be a piece of cake for him to leave these 10 fingerprints on Luo Qingtong's hand. There wouldn't be any leakage of energy or aura to wake Luo Qingtong up. After doing all this, he was satisfied and fell asleep with Luo Qingtong in his arms. As for the wooden bed that had suddenly become narrow, he had asked Bei Qing and Feng Yu to redo it. After all, Luo Qingtong was no longer sleeping here. The bed didn't need to be so big, right? As for Luo Qingtong running back to sleep with him, he didn't know at all. Yi Qianxian had planned everything so that Luo Qingtong could leave the tent to sleep elsewhere. Luo Qingtong didn't know anything. She had always thought that Yi Qianxian didn't discover her identity. Naturally, she didn't think that Yi Qianxian had plotted against her. She thought that it was her own fault. After all, she did want to get close to Yi Qianxian, so she tried every possible way to live in his tent. She completely believed that she would do something to Yi Qianxian after she fell asleep. If that wasn't the case, with Luo Qingtong's scheming mind, how could she have fallen into Yi Qianxian's trap? As the saying goes, those closely involved can't see clearly. This time, Luo Qingtong had fallen into Yi Qianxian's trap. At this moment, when she saw the man looking at her, she suddenly looked up at the sky and pretended that she didn't know anything. Last night, she had almost torn Yi Qianxian's clothes. Chapter 26:10. Last time, when she'd failed to kiss him, Yi Qianxian had found an excuse for her to bite him to death. This time, she'd failed to tear his clothes. Could it be that she wanted to freeze him to death? Luo Qingtong felt that such a retarded excuse wasn't something that Yi Qianxian would believe. Even she couldn't bring herself to say it. It was an insult to her intelligence. Just as she was feeling depressed and conflicted, Chu Yuqing and the others saw the storm of energy in the sky and were pleasantly surprised. Haha! The heart of the continent has opened, and the heavenly grass has appeared. This heavenly grass will definitely be ours. Chu Yuqing and the others felt an indescribable sense of certainty. But soon, his expression turned ugly again. It's a pity that we didn't get rid of that bastard Chu Lingfeng before this heavenly grass appeared. Otherwise, we would have one less major problem in the fight for this heavenly grass. But it's good that he's not dead. Chu Yuqing sneered. Even if Chu Lingfeng had told them that he'd tried to assassinate Chu Lingfeng, no one would have believed him. And even if someone did, so what? There was no evidence. And there were no clan elders present on this abandoned continent. It was impossible for Chu Lingfeng to cause trouble for him. All he had to do was kill him in the fight for this heavenly grass. And in the fight for this heavenly grass, crooks and honest folk would be mixed together. There would be both the Chu clan and the Lian clan. As the #1 member of the Tianfeng Chu clan, Chu Lingfeng was bound to be targeted by the opposing Lian clan. When the time came, Chu Yuqing would join forces with others to make a move against him. Perhaps Chu Lingfeng would take care of the Lian clan for them, and then die at their hands. Wouldn't that be the best of both worlds? Killing two birds with one stone. As Chu Yuqing thought this, he felt very pleased with himself. Quite a few members of the Tianfeng Chu clan had already gathered around him. Among them were the top members of the 6th Elders and 9th Elders factions. They had no choice. First, the 6th Elders and 3rd Elders factions were on good terms. Second, Chu Tianming had participated in the operation against Luo Qingtong. Not only that, but when Chu Yuqing had ambushed Chu Lingfeng, they'd been nearby as well. Under these circumstances, the 6th Elders faction had no way to extricate themselves from this matter. They said that this matter had nothing to do with them, so they could only cooperate with Chu Yuqing. As for the 9th Elders people, they were on good terms with Madame Xing, and had long been secretly siding with Bai Xing. This time, they had received Bai Xing's orders to help Chu Yuqing in secret. Now that Chu Yuqing's ambush had failed, and Chu Yufei had also been caught up in it, they had no choice but to act. No matter what, he could not let Chu Lingfeng leave the abandoned continent alive. In addition, Chu Yuqing had also contacted the two ambitious elder bloodlines of the two families. At this point, more than half of the Tianfeng Chu clan's 9 great elder clans were on Chu Yuqing's side. Chu Yuqing had originally thought that with this lineup, finding and killing Chu Lingfeng wouldn't be a problem at all. But who would have thought that Chu Lingfeng would evaporate from the abandoned continent in the past few days? No one could find even a shadow of him. He'd clearly been seriously injured, and his bloodline power had been exhausted. Even if it was to recover his strength, he should have come out to find a way. But in the end, there was no news of him at all. Who knew where the hell he was hiding? You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.